Welcome to the Houston Valley Scottish Rite podcast. The Houston Valley Scottish Rite building is just a stone's throw away from NRG Stadium, where the Houston Texans play. And of course, with the golden microphone, I'm your host, Brother Jason Reese, 32nd degree, KCCH, and member of the Houston Valley Scottish Rite. We have another special episode for you all. We are across the Potomac River, coming to you from the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., with the Sovereign Grand Commander of the Supreme Council, Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction, and past Grand Master of Virginia, illustrious James Cole. James Cole, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. Doing very well, Jason. It's good to be on here with you.
I appreciate you taking your time. Well, we'll kind of go right into it. What I ask every Mason, what got you to become a Mason? Why did you become a Mason?
Honestly, I became a Mason because my mom thought it was a good idea. I went to her house for Sunday dinner just after I turned 25. And she said to me after dinner, I was getting ready to go home. And she said, I think it's time, you're 25 years old. I think it's time you joined a Masonic Lodge. And I said, what is the Masonic Lodge? And she said, I don't know, but all the good men that I have known in life have been members of the Masonic Lodge. And she rattled off her favorite teacher from elementary school and her high school principal and the chairman of the deacons at the church we went to in North Carolina before we moved. And she rattled off all of the deacons of the church we were attending there. And little did I know that the church we were attending was across the street from the lodge. So, it was just that way. And I said, okay, well, give me some information. And she called the next day and said, come by here. You need to sign a piece of paper. And the petition was all filled out. There were 2 checks attached. The vouchers had paid for my initiation fee and my first year's dues. And all I had to do was sign. And the 2 vouchers were her 2 partners in an insurance agency, father and son. The son is still alive. Jim Sr. Passed away about 10 years ago, but the son was the man who talked me into going into public accounting as a profession. So I had a lot of connections, but it was really my mom's idea.
Yes, sir. So I went up and kind of looked up your lodge. I always like to see where people were raised, like the actual building. Yeah. So you were raised in a small little 2-story lodge.
Yeah.
Nestled in some foothills. Really beautiful building. Chartered in 1891 in Elliston, Virginia, just not too far from West Virginia. So when you look back, even going as far as Grand Master and now Sovereign Grand Commander, you ever look back at that and say, what a journey, what a life journey you've went on through from that tall little lodge kneeling at the altar to now in Washington, D.C. and throughout the world.
Yeah. Yes, I do. And I try to keep that in front of me all the time. As a matter of fact, when I came to work here, I had one of the staff members make I've got a handmade replica of my lodge altar that sits beside the door of my office. And I'm talking, it's a 1/3 replica. So it's 33 inches wide, 14 inches deep, and it is suitable for kneeling. It's the standard altar height. The trim that he put on it is the same trim that's on the altar in the executive chamber. So and the kneeling pad and the altar cloth were handmade by my mother. The Bible was a gift of the Grand Lodge of Virginia. Square and Compass, a gift of McCoy Publishing, headquartered in Virginia. So it tells, to me, reminds me of the entire story of my beginning. I began in the Blue Lodge. I took my obligations as an active member of the council on an altar that had that little same trim on it. And so it's always a big deal to me to look back to history.
What do you miss most about attending your metal lodge back in Ellison?
I just miss the friends. I was the lodge secretary for 7 years. And at one time when I was in line in the lodge, all of our officers were under age 30, which was the only lodge in Virginia at that time with to be able to say that. So we had a relatively young group that went through at the same time, went through the chairs, and I just miss being with my friends. I keep up with them. I get all the newsletters, and the current lodge secretary is one of my close friends, and was actually my district deputy grand master when I was grand master. So my life is full of little circular stories like that continue to go round and round.
So one of the things I've noted about you, I've listened to you speak several times. You're a great public speaker. You're really engaging. And through my research on you, you've been public speaking since your early teenage years. Was there a time when you got up, you were a lay speaker, I believe it was at that early age. Was there a time, did somebody encourage you, or was it like, man, I really do love public speaking?
There were two people that encouraged me, one in church and one professionally. In church, there was a Baptist preacher who came from Tennessee came to that little church there in Elliston, which at that time the old church building, so to speak, was two doors down on the same side of the street as the lodge building. So it's that white building. If you ever looked at Google Earth, if you just panned a little bit to the left, there's an old white clapboard building, and that was the church where we actually started. Then we built a new church on the hill across the street. So this preacher was, in his terms, called to be the preacher there until the new church could be built. And they decided to have a youth Sunday, and he walked into the class and asked for a volunteer, and the class decided that I was going to do it. I protested. I found out that he and the teacher and a couple of the students had planned this, and he encouraged me to begin, to do that. And apparently, yeah, I did okay the first time because they asked me to do it again about 6 months later. And then we actually transferred from the Baptist church to a Methodist church because my mom got involved in that insurance agency, and we felt closer, with a lot of the folks at that next little town, which was all of 5 miles away. And so I went there, and they decided to start having youth Sundays, and they said, well, we know this guy's already been speaking in the Baptist church. He can speak here. So that got me going there. Then when I went in, and I did a lot of that. And then when I graduated from college, went into public accounting, there was a tax manager who wanted me. He said, I think you would be really good to do professional education, teach other CPAs classes. And he said, I want you to teach a class on cash management. And I said, I don't have a clue about this, man. And he said, you can do it. And so I did. And they liked it. And then the next time they needed a speaker, and then it just, and it went on from there. And I've done, I have averaged over the last 40 years about two to three presentations a week year round. So I've had thousands of practice sessions, so to speak. So one of these days I'll get it right.
Yes, sir. So growing up, so you joined the lodge, EA, Fellowcraft, Matt. What made you join the Scottish Rite? I know you're York Rite, but why did you join the Scottish Rite?
I joined York Rite 8 years before I joined Scottish Rite. And I'll just be honest. My mentor in Lodge was he was the Tyler. When I came into Lodge, I met him, and he was at the time the Grand Senior Warden. So he became my Grand Lodge mentor, so to speak. And he was the personal representative in the Valley of Roanoke. And he came to me and said, you realize that you're going to be Grand Master one day. And I said, no. And he said, yes, you will. And he said, in order to get a full knowledge of the fraternity, you should look into the Scottish Rite. And he said, you're already in the York Rite and so on. And I said, okay, if that's what you recommend, I do. And I really liked it. I've got a master's in education, even though my undergraduate's in accounting. I worked for a university. So I have a love of education. So Scottish Rite was a very natural flow for me within the world of Freemasonry. And but I got into it because of a recommendation of this past Grand Master, who is right now the senior past Grand Master in Virginia, John Ogenshay.
So you served as Grand Master of Virginia in 2001, I believe.
Yes.
So and I always love these questions because it helps everybody that hears them. So what was your biggest accomplishment that you took the most pride in as Grandmaster? And what was one thing that you're like, if I could turn back the time, I would put that at number 2 or number 1 of my list to go back and accomplish as Grandmaster?
Well, I had 4 or 5 goals. The one that I accomplished that I was proudest of, that took the longest and was the biggest hill to climb, was the recognition of Prince Hall. We were the first Grand Lodge in the Old South to recognize Prince Hall as regular. I worked on that for 5 years as I went through the line. And I am most proud of that. What I wish I could have done, I mean, people say that it was a success, but I think I could have done better. And that was to build a bigger scholarship endowment. I wanted to build a big scholarship endowment. It reached the $1 million. I wanted to reach $1 million. I didn't get there. It reached the $1 million level a couple years later. I laid the groundwork for it, but I wish I could have found a big donor that could have helped me out that year.
So going off of what you had said about the Scottish Rite, why you joined, I get asked all the time when I attend lodges. Sometimes brothers just want to be Blue Lodge. Some just want to be Shrine, York Rite. And they ask me, why should I join the Scottish Rite? And what would your answer be to those brothers?
Well, I get asked that a lot. And my answer is, it allows you to continue the journey. But there are a lot of ways to continue the journey, as you just pointed out. Only job in Freemasonry that I'd ever had any ambition for, the only job I'd ever thought about maybe getting one day, was lodge instructor of work, meaning the ritualist in the local lodge. And I never got there. I mean, I've done a lot of ritual in the lodge, but I just never got what I said I wanted to get. But it allows you to continue the journey in Freemasonry for if you are inclined toward further education. Some people are inclined toward ritual. Some people are inclined maybe to work with kids. They go into the shrine. I'm a Shriner, I'm in York Rite, as you mentioned. So you have to look, Freemasonry, a lot of Freemasonry is about self-evaluation. So as you evaluate yourself, and if you determine that you want more, that you want to get a little additional light and enlightenment and education, then Scottish Rite is for you. It's not for everyone. Neither is Freemasonry in general. It's not for everyone. I mean, we have a West Gate, but as I like to remind people, there's 2 sides to that West Gate. You don't need to be running toward a lodge door if that's not for you, and it's not for everyone. And just as the door literally has a use on both sides, and we sometimes forget that. We sometimes chastise ourselves because someone joined and then within a couple or 3 or 4 years dropped out. Well, it might not be for them. It really might not be. So the West Gate is a two-sided deal. It's a two-sided gate.
Yes.
So Scottish Rite my simple way is to say it allows you to continue the journey.
So with that being said, with the what you had just mentioned, the new Scottish Rite Masons, and when I address our classes of reunion, I say it, it's a lot of brothers come, they get their 32nd degree, and then most of the time we don't see a lot of them again, and that's okay. We try and get them showing, but trying to, I guess, give the brothers what they want more so that that happens less often. What do you think the Scottish Rite Masons are looking for that are coming into our into the Rite today?
I think they are looking for personal relationships. I think they are looking for the essence of who we are. The distinction between the Blue Lodge and Scottish Rite in that case being that again, it is people of more of a like mind that want to take an additional step, not above and not beyond, but an additional step, I would say, deeper into Freemasonry, as opposed to the Blue Lodge, which we should very strongly support. So I really think that what they're looking for is to have something touch them. And it's not going to be the same for everyone. And because of that, it makes it a little more difficult in operating your valleys. But one of the ways that we need to be able to address that is we've got to, as an organization, learn to listen better. We don't do a good job of listening. We do a good job of repeating what we have said for 30 years and expecting the same results from this group as we had from the prior group and as we had from the prior group. But we've never had that experience. We've never had the same reaction from all those groups, but we do know, because we're a Mason, that we're almost ritualistic in the way we approach our members. In other words, repetitive.
Yes.
Well, this is the way we do it. We always go into that room down there after lunch. And then we go into that room after we go to that room. And it's okay to be organized, but sometimes it's nice for a change, But
Yes,
we've got to do a better job of listening. And it's not just with our ears. It's using surveys. I offered the other day, I was on a Zoom with Valley officers, and I said, look, if you want to do a member survey, our staff will help you put together a survey and you can send it out. Just my rule is don't make it more than 10 questions, make it really quick, but have people provide input and then do something with it. So yeah, it has to be where someone feels a personal value from this, because everything's a value proposition in life. So if you don't feel that this is a personal value to you, then you're going to go do something else. But we've got to be careful how we treat our non-attending brethren, because 98% of the 85 to 90% of people who do not come, okay, you got a roster that has 100, all right? 10 to 15 will show up regularly, all right? That's Freemasonry. But the 85 to 90, 98% of them will continue to write a check for their dues every year. If these guys wise up and say, well, wait a minute, I'm not going, so I'm not paying, then as I told the secretary the other night, you need to turn around and turn the light switch off, because we're going to be shutting down. If we said you only have to pay if you show up, then we're dead.
yes,
right? But we can't do that, because Freemasonry and Scottish Rite is not intended to be an attendance mechanism. It is intended to be a transformative process. If we are not, if we come in, as I said to a guy the other night, if we come in a guy Okay. We knock at the door, we're a guy. We leave the door, we're a brother. And in that transformation, these people are willing to literally pay for that without coming back inside the door. So we need to value that. And so when someone shows up and they haven't been around, they haven't been attending for the last year and a half, you don't overwhelm them with, well, I don't know where you've been, I mean, because you're making them feel bad,
Yeah.
It's good to see you. I remember I was with you and such, remember all positive stuff. We're not really good at that. So it's a value proposition.
I've been in charge of the ambassadors for Houston Valley for 6 or 7 years, and the biggest lesson I've learned is there's no silver bullet, and my tactics keep changing. And the one recently that it finally hit hard with me, and so a few years ago, I became virtual master in College Station, and we took an officers retreat to Louisiana, to New Orleans, to Germania Lodge. And most of our members have never seen one of the Scottish Rite craft degrees. And so the Grand Master of Louisiana conferred on me as a candidate as an VA degree. And it was quite, it really made an impression on all of us. We were like, wow, this is something. And then listening to Brother De Hoyos also state that most of the world practices the craft degrees in Europe. And so that kind of struck me. I was like, and so I would talk about that when I went to other lodges promoting the Scottish Rite. And then I started noticing people started listening to me a little bit closer. And I was like, huh. And so that's when I came up with the idea of doing for our valley the Master Craftsman program for the Symbolic Lodge. And so what I did was I took little snippets out of esoterica. When I visited these lodges, I would bring up, about the cable tow. You guys know what that really is? You think it's for security reasons? And then they're like, their mouths drop, or the square and compasses and all this. And then I said, and it's really fascinating talking about Pike, is he had the same experiences that most of us have. I asked what this meant. No one could tell me. And it was like, oh my gosh, that was happening during his time. And so relating that to other members who are not members, or even the brothers who have, like you say, kind of gone away, got their black hats and just kind of drifted away. And so when I offered this, 25 brothers signed up almost immediately for the class, symbolic class, and they wanted to do it as a group. And so a part of me, and I kind of promote the craft degrees now. So with that being said, what's your opinion on the craft degrees? Should we be promoting Grand Lodges, not necessarily to open up like Louisiana, open up these craft lodges, but more of a instructural part of Masonry? Because there's a lot more things to learn symbolically as well.
Yes. One of the things, one of my first decisions that people thought was going to be controversial was that I authorized the publication of the Porch in the Middle Chamber, the discussion of the so-called red degrees. And I think that we need to have more education. But as I said I wrote a letter to every Grand Master before I authorized the publication. I wrote a letter and I said, look, I want you to understand this is not Scottish Rite trying to say these are better degrees, or this is a competing system or anything like that. I said, I am a past Grand Master, and I think I am probably the one among Grand Commanders who could then offer this in a way that is not going to be hurtful to any Grand Lodge, because because of my background. But I think that what you're doing with it is exactly what we need. That we need to show as for educational purposes, and that's what I wanted to publicize these for, was to show for educational purposes the different perspectives. And right now, tomorrow I'm having a 2-hour Zoom with half dozen leaders from Scottish Rite councils around the world to prepare for the World Conference coming up in May. And to know that all of them came up in a different manner than, the York Rite is what is taught in a Blue Lodge in all of America. with the exception of Louisiana in that one district. So knowing those differences, but then realizing that there's really no ultimate difference, it reminds us of seeing different perspectives of everything. It's just like when you go through the degrees, even in the Blue Lodge, before I got my fellowcraft degree, I was giving the closing charge in the EA degree to one of my fellow candidates because I wanted to be involved in the ritual that much. But I learned by standing up there and giving the closing charge in the ritual of the EA degree, by reciting that to him 2 weeks after I had it given to me, I was able to see a different perspective of it. And it allowed me to be more enlightened by being able to see different perspectives. And that's what I view the two sets of degrees. As you know, there are close parallels
Yes.
in symbolism and most of the principles. But it's just like you said earlier, you used a phrase that I use almost every day. There's no silver bullet. And even ritualistically, that's the same thing, because we can all see different sides of this from different perspectives. And that's what that gives us.
It does. And I also realized promoting the Scottish Rite is promoting the Blue Lodge,
Right.
is promoting the first 3 degrees. And so in using esoterica, and so I started telling lodges when I go to them, I'm not here to promote the Scottish Rite. I'm here to promote y'all Blue Lodge degrees and the education symbolism behind it. And then it kind of perks some people's ears up. They're like, okay, you're not here just trying to take money. We're trying to educate y'all. I want y'all to go back. And even when we do our Zoom meetings for the classes, I said, highlight your books. Take a paragraph right after the next meeting after a master's degree. Read that paragraph about the symbolisms of some of the parts of that degree and how Albert Pike took from that. And I said, and start promoting that in your lodges. And I said, you'll be surprised how many petitions will start coming in. We're like, well, wait a minute. I thought it was just another, $200 or whatever a year. Now it's giving them something that you normally don't get anywhere else,
Right.
not even in your Blue Lodge. So this is it is kind of exciting. We're finishing up. Matter of fact, this Sunday is our 7th. We'll be finishing up the Symbolic Lodge. So I'm kind of excited. I'll keep tracking everybody and helping them out. So it's everybody's having a good time. It's tough though. A lot of guys are like, man, this is hard. I was like, yes, it is fun.
Yeah, I remember when we first discussed that idea, of having the course. And it was something that I pushed when I was lieutenant, because I thought it could be something that's very beneficial to our relationship with Blue Lodge.
Well, so moving on to focus, right now I see throughout the world, Masonic or otherwise, a leadership problem. It just seems the world's getting tougher nowadays. And I was told by younger, oh, that's just what old people say. And I was like, well, I am 47. Maybe I am one of the old people now, but I do see it. So it all starts at the top. And so speaking with some brothers about, the next Grandmaster, who we're going to go for Grand Junior Warden. And brother said, well, I like so-and-so. And I said, why? Why do you like him as for Grandmaster to be put into line? And he said, well, because he really loves the fraternity. And I said, that's great. And I know this brother. I said, he's a good guy, but that's not enough for me. He's running a $10 million corporation. We need to be thinking of more of, yes, he should have a love of fraternity, but he needs to have some type of business background or at least be able to read a sheet. So my question to you is, when voting for a Grandmaster or in the line of Grandmasters we do here in Texas, what's something we should look for? What do you advise for us to look for?
Well, certainly you do want someone who has a love of the fraternity. I don't disagree with that, but there is a skill set that is necessary. They have to have the ability to have some level of business knowledge, operational kind of business management. They have to be able to understand budgeting. So that's a kind of a category. love of the fraternity, another little category being having some sort of business sense, as you mentioned. I think they have to be effective communicators. And I always regard communication as a two-way street. You gotta listen twice as much as you speak. They have to be able to do that, but they also have to communicate publicly. I know a lot of people that love the fraternity and maybe can really, budget for a lodge or for a big organization. But if they get up in front of people, they're going to put them to sleep, or they're going to get them upset. They're not going to keep their attention. So communication of all the skills, communication, and remember, I always regard it as a two-way street, but communication is the most important skill you have to have. And you also need some vision, which sort of overarches the rest of it. You have to know, you have to have some vision to see the forest and not just the trees. You have to know not just how this communication will sound to one person, but how it will sound to 100 people, or how it will sound when that one person repeats it, because there are ways of communicating. And I do a lot of storytelling. You've already heard examples. You've already seen examples of that in the last half hour. I use a lot of storytelling because stories break things down, and they are more digestible by the human brain. And they go into your memory a little bit better if someone tells a story. The church that is 2 doors down from that little lodge, 2-story lodge building, that's a white clapboard church. So I tie those things in, and particularly when you can use colors, sounds, experiences, because that goes deeper in your memory. And therefore, when you walk away from whatever that communication was, which is speech or a committee meeting or a workshop or whatever, you can retain more of it. At least scientifically, you're going to have a chance of retaining more of it.
So yeah, and it's I know we've seen throughout the United States with Grand Lodges lately, we've all tried to push through and had, like you said, some leaders stronger than others. Some leaders are stronger than others. So with that being said, what changes do you see in masonry in general coming down the pipeline that you see in the future, something that we all should start kind of being more proactive towards?
I think what I said a while ago about the fact that 90% of the 95% of the 90% who do not attend continue to pay their dues. I think the younger generations are going to be more of a, you got to show me, because the older generations were more tied into the institution. So I'm part of this, and therefore it's okay even if I'm not there. The younger generations are a little bit turned just a little bit in their attitude and saying, okay, what have I been getting from this? What am I receiving? What is the benefit? Even if I'm not physically there, what is my benefit? So it's a slightly different value proposition that we're moving to, number one. Number two, just as a practical matter, you're going to see, as I said to the Conference of Grand Secretaries in my last speech to them as Lieutenant Grand Commander, I said, one of the biggest things that we will see is that there will be more Masonic facilities sold in the next 10 to 20 years than were built in the last 75 years, because we have got building issues, okay, around the fraternity, and they have become financial issues. And because one of our primary relationships, inappropriately, is our dues relationship with our members. How many members do we have that the last time they heard anything from the Valley was a dues notice, right? So because of that, it puts extraordinary strain on the biggest asset we each have, and we are very poor managers of those assets. And I'm afraid that one day history is going to say that the biggest mistake that Freemasonry made was going from operative to speculative, and then back again to operative, in the sense that we want to build these wonderful buildings, and the building is this and the building is that, and we can't sell this building because that's where I got my degrees and all this other stuff. We all get so caught up in it. There are lodges that I have been in, and I've talked to the members, and they can't remember the last meeting that they didn't hear about a building problem come up in the meeting. There are valleys that are going through that right now. I mean, I've spent an hour dealing with an issue this morning of a valley that is got significant building issues. I probably put in 30 or 40 hours to a building issue in another Orient a couple months ago. So those are practical purposes, but I really think our members are going to be more, okay, let's tally up what's in this. You know, I've not received anything lately. I don't mean money, but experience or communication. And there's also going to be a big change in our leadership structure. How many of us have secretaries that have been in place for more than 15 years? Because if it's more than 15 years, that's about 3 generations past in terms of communication abilities. If you know, on average. Now, some people keep up, but there's a lot of people. I've got people right now. I'm waiting on a valley to send me information about honors from one particular Orient, big Orient, and they have not sent it because the person doesn't know how to go to the link, tap on the link, go and fill it in. They have put it on paper and they're mailing it to me instead of going to the link because they're afraid they will screw it up. So there's going to be a lot of changes in that too. How we interact with our members is going to be a big one.
Yes, sir. So now I want to focus the last few questions here on the man, you personally. So I've heard you you have spoken about how supportive your wife Mary Ann has been throughout your Masonic journey. So that being said, to the brothers who the new younger Masons, younger meaning age and time in, that are married, what advice do you give for those brothers?
I think they need to keep their wife informed. They need to keep their wife to look for activities for their wife to become engaged. And I think if there are not those opportunities, that they need to rattle a cage in the valley and tell them that there needs to be opportunities for the wives to be engaged. They don't need to come and sit in on a stated meeting, but they need to have a couple of activities where they can participate sometime during the year so that they can see value as well.
Okay. Yeah, because I get a lot of those, especially with the younger Masons. Like you said, you've got to give them a reason to either show up and get away from their wives or girlfriends or just whatever they have going, their partners, whoever is in their life. You got to give them that reason, and keeping, I think, your spouse, girlfriend, what have you, involved, it only strengthens and makes them attend more.
Sure. And inform them. That's just as important, because if it means a lot to you, then you're going to talk about it when you go home. If you go home and you just come in and you start watching television or something, and she goes, well, how'd your night go? Okay, I guess. Then the impression is that it's not a big deal. And therefore, if there comes a conflict where, okay, well, I don't know if you need to go to that because I need you to do such and such with me, that could be reversed. If you come home and you're like, you know, that was just great, and and you go on, and she's like, okay, it's wonderful. And then the next time it's a gray area, she's going to say, well, you go on, you had a great time last time.
They want to support you too when they see that you're excited.
Right. Absolutely.
So what are some goals that you have before you hang up hang up the gavel and the gown of Grand Commander? What's something you want to accomplish before you leave office?
Goodness, I've got a list of a lot of smaller things, but one of the things that I want to accomplish is to feel that we have made a generational change in leadership. And some of that is being done on the council, but I really want to try to make the transition to to I don't want to say new generation of thinking, but a new perspective or approach. I want us to try to have more experiences outside the box. Too often we pick a Valley secretary because he's the guy that's retired and can come in and do what we think is the secretary job when it's not really the secretary's job. I mean, they think that you've got to be in the office and this and that. So we've got to, I'm looking to make sure that the bridge is in place to a new generation of leadership. I want to be able to, now it's one of those goals, and honestly, it's the first time I've said this to anyone, but it's one of those goals that you don't know you're there until you look back, so it's not going to be something that I can go, okay, I'm done now, I'm out of here. It will only be judged in retrospect, but as long as I'm striving toward that, and you've heard me say different aspects of it several times now, as long as I'm striving toward that, then I'm satisfied with myself. And that's striving toward bringing about this kind of different perspective in how we run our valleys, and being more member focused, having members more knowledgeable of what goes on, of the finances, and of how the building, what the building needs, and where we're going to go, and more strategic thinking at the valley level. I think it might be a simple way of saying it.
So whenever that day comes, and I just thought this was a fun question. You go back to your Blue Lodge. What office do you hope to get? I've seen we have a really good one of my favorite past grandmasters in Texas. He became a senior steward of his lodge, and it was just it's really neat to see that. And a lot of brothers get to meet the past grandmaster, and there he is as a senior steward. What's something that you'd want to do back at the Blue Lodge?
I want to be chaplain. To me, I mean, you would have thought, if you remember what I said, you would have thought, well, he wants to go back and be that lodge instructor work. I figure that my brain will be too dead by then to be able to do that effectively. But I want to be chaplain. The greatest honor I ever had in life was having a chapel at the Masonic Home in Virginia named for me. That's not something that's really ever been publicized anywhere. But given, the way I started my journey standing up in front of other people was in the pulpit of a little church, and given that, how I feel about my personal journey in Freemasonry, I just think that I would like to be the chaplain. And that way, they get the benefit of me only having to be limited in my speaking to a couple of prayers per meeting, and they don't have to listen to me rant on. But I just think it would mean a lot to me in my journey in Freemasonry to be a chaplain in my little lodge.
I found it interesting. The Houston Valley newsletter, every once in a while, I'll put an article in there, and I look for scriptures that the majority of Christians and non-Christians have never heard of. And the talking donkey, that usually gets most
Balaam.
people.
Yeah.
Correct. And the name of the article was Wise Ass. I thought it was a cute name because the donkey turned out to be the wise person in the room in that particular story. And a lot of brothers came up to me and said, that was in the Bible. I said, yeah, I guess Shrek is, got some validity to that story. With that being said, I'll kind of leave the floor. Do you have a message you'd like to give to the Orient of Texas, the Houston Valley brothers?
I want you to take the opportunity to try to get the most out of Scottish Rite that you can. And I want you to realize that none of your leaders are perfect, especially me, but we can all benefit when we work together. And working together means we have to communicate a little bit better together. That means not only do you need to talk to the leaders, but you need to listen to how they would respond. And you need to respect and therefore listen to the ideas of others, even if they don't agree with you. So I think if we did more of that we're going to have a better journey in Scottish Rite. And I'm serious about this. If I can ever help anyone, don't hesitate to shoot me an email or stop me at a meeting and ask. because I do spend a lot of my time communicating with individual members, and that's what I want to do.
Well, once again, I appreciate it. To all the members listening out there, find your passion in masonry. If it's in the kitchen, if it's cleaning up, it's in the booth, in props, do it. That's where you'll find masonry at. That's where you'll find the love of the craft at. Once again, thank you all for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.